Hello, and welcome to episode 37 of the Carry On with Carrie podcast. Today, I am happy to introduce you to Will Craig. Will Craig is a writer, husband, mental health advocate, and the author of One Step Forward, Ideally in the Right Direction, which is available on Amazon. He comes from a place of personal experience, and he is a huge mental health advocate. He makes himself so vulnerable in sharing what he's gone through. And it just helps others relate. And I think you're really going to get a lot out of this episode. So I really hope you enjoy. So without further ado, now it's time to talk. Hello, and welcome to the show, Will. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm excited for you to be here. It's going to be a great conversation.
I think so too. I'm really looking forward to it. Todd said nothing but great things, said you're a sweetheart. So I'm just looking forward to engaging with somebody else who's as passionate about mental health as I am. And I'll warn you now, I'm a bit long-winded, so I apologize in advance for anybody that's looking to hear her and not me. But I just am so passionate about all of this.
So, Will, I just, I thought I'd start off this conversation just, what drove you to feeling that this was something that you needed to get out there, that you needed to share?
Something that stands out to me is people are always looking like, I never know what to say to somebody when they've lost someone or when they're going through a tough time. I never know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, because I think it's human nature to want to jump in and solve the problem and build something. But to me, the best thing you can do for anyone in that situation is just to listen.
Exactly.
Just to be a place where they can go and be a safe haven, and you're not going to judge them, and you're not going to think differently of them. Like, that's my personal, if I have one actual mission in all of this, everything that I'm doing, if there's one true mission that I have, it is, I fundamentally believe that people want to tell other people what's going on in their life and what's happening. But more often than not, especially the dark, especially the parts that people are ashamed of,
Mm-hmm.
those people, they'd rather suffer in silence than be the first one to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm going through this and it hurts and I'm ashamed, or I'm broken.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at it as, okay, that's fine. Somewhere in me, shame is supposed to exist. It doesn't, for whatever reason. I was born with that. I don't know what it is.
Yep.
And so I'll get out there. I'll tell my story. I'll tell the things that I'm not proud of. And I'll put those things out there, because my hope is that if I do it and other people do it, we subconsciously give everyone else permission to do that.
Exactly. It just becomes normal. It's not I have to hide from this. Yeah. When you started sharing your story, how did you feel about it after? Did you feel relieved, or did you feel any sense of, oh boy, what did I just do? What did I just open up here?
There's certain parts that I kept more guarded, and then there's other parts that I've always been open about. And then I got to a certain place when I realized that everything was kind of interconnected. And that's when I realized you can't just pick and choose. It's all part of who you are.
Yeah, I love that perspective, and I so appreciate you sharing and being so open about it. I think it's such an admirable thing that you open up to people about your experiences. Can you give us a bit of background as to where you're coming from?
I was born with a condition called hydrocephalus. It's when the cerebral spinal fluid that surrounds your brain, your body, or anybody who doesn't have it, it drains out naturally. Mine, more comes in, none comes out. Oh. And so I have a mechanical device called a shunt that drains out that cerebral spinal fluid. And that shunt it's made of polymer plastic. It's not meant to last forever. Mm-hmm. And when it breaks, I've got, and keep in mind, this is an estimate, but like 8 hours.
Wow.
And and at a certain point, lots of things can happen. So research done by the Hydrocephalus Association and a number of wonderful groups. It's still considered by the Mayo Clinic a rare condition. Only about 1 million people in the United States have it. That's a rough estimate again. But I mean, that sounds like a lot, but when you consider there's over 300 million people, it's less than 1%.
Yeah, exactly.
Less
That's
than
right.
a third of 1%. So it is still considered rare.
Yes.
And so anyway, so I was born with that condition, and why that's relevant in this conversation is because my shunt broke a couple times when I was little. It kind of grew with me when I was a baby. And obviously, I don't remember any of those things. I was diagnosed, and then I had a surgery when I was 2 months old.
Okay.
And then, I had surgery for the diagnosis at 2 months, and then at 4 months is when we had to go back and do a revision. And then I didn't have another problem until I was 16 years old.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I remember it vividly. I went to school. I took an exam on proofs, which somehow I got, I think, a B- on, and I am shocked that happened. And between periods, I passed out on the floor and kind of got carried by the nurse into the nurse's office, and all this led to at the time it had been 16 years since I'd had a problem. Like, it wasn't our first assumption that something was wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And so my dad, he called my grandparents. They came and got me. Eventually, my dad did happen to come home, and he was like, "Yeah, this isn't. He's like cold to the touch. We might want to take him somewhere." And sure enough, my shunt broke. Like, to shorten the story up a bit.
Yeah.
And so I had this revision, and now I'm old enough to know what's happening. And I'm obviously relieved to be alive, but then I found myself in this position where I see my family, and I see my friends and my girlfriend at the time, and these people all in so much pain because of having to wait on a doctor's note to see how I'm doing.
Yeah.
And how I'm feeling. By no fault of my own, I decided I have to be exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be exceptional because if I'm not, there's no reason for any of these people to love me.
Wow.
Because I looked at my life as a sunk cost, that if I'm not exceptional, if I'm not beyond measure, if I'm not someone that everyone's wanting to be the center of attention around, they gravitate towards, well, I've got this other thing, and it's going to continue to be a problem for the rest of my life. And I was horrified by that. Well, flash forward then, 8 years
You've
later.
already put expectations on yourself that you had to keep.
Completely unreasonable expectation.
Yes.
That no one is perfect. I'm far from it. And my life I was miserable at my job, and I was dating a woman, and I was miserable in that relationship, and she had no business being with me because I was barely happy on my own. I wasn't even happy on my own. I can't even say that.
Right.
And I was just in a really dark place. But all of that came from a place of needing to be perfect, needing to be exceptional, as I said, and that's when I started to battle with suicidal thoughts. It's when I started to really battle with a lot of struggles within my own darkness.
Yeah.
And thankfully my dad just showed up one day. Him and my mom were terribly worried about me because I stopped communicating. I just wasn't.
All the classic signs. Yeah.
I didn't live by them. I lived about 4 hours away.
Okay.
And so my dad showed up unexpectedly, and it's like, you're coming home, and I did, and thankfully they did, because I'm not sure what would have happened if he hadn't. And so I look at that, and I get back home, and to my parents' house, and I get a job again. I'm like waiting tables at Red Robin in Evansville, Indiana, and I'm feeling a little bit miserable about my life, but I at least know I'm alive, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But so I kind of I was like, oh, I've dealt with it. I've put those demons to bed.
Yeah.
And so as I do it, I go on with my life. I make friends, and I rebuild relationships, and I'm doing all the right things. And then I meet this wonderful woman named Allison Schaefer, and we were dating for about a year, and she died unexpectedly. I spent a weekend with her, and then we didn't live together at the time, and I
that's devastating.
Yeah, it was. I was there, and then I left, and then we had talked that night, and then the next day I didn't hear from her all day. And so
and like, did you were you right away worried about something, or were you kind of giving it a bit of time, or was it not like her at all to not hear from her?
by the like what you're describing is exactly how I was feeling in that day. It was like normally she would text me at like 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. She used to work at a bakery, so she would be at work at 3 in the morning sometimes.
Yeah,
so
early.
For her, 7 a.m. is sleeping in.
Yeah.
So, I didn't hear from her by like 11. I was like, wow, if you like actually slept in for once, I'll be shocked.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't hear from her, and I called multiple times and didn't hear from her, and then eventually I got to a place where I was like, all right, something's wrong. So I started calling local hospitals, like asking if anyone's come in. Maybe there was an accident or something, and
Mm-hmm.
no one had heard anything. I reached out to one of her roommates. Were out of town on a trip, and I reached out to one of them, and I just said, hey, like, I know like we don't know each other super well, but like, have you heard from her? Like, is everything okay? She's like, no, actually, I tried calling her and she didn't answer either. I was like, okay, that's interesting. I'm gonna go over there. I'll let you know what I find. And I drove over to their place. Door was locked. I'm pretty sure I tried to break it down. I don't know what I did to my shoulder, but it was not great.
Right.
And then I kind of had the wherewithal to call the apartment complex. So I was like, well, surely, like, this is an emergency, right?
Yeah.
And they can reach out to the other roommate and ask her if they don't believe me. Eventually, they went in and they called the ambulance, but there was nothing they could do. She was already gone.
Right. Ugh.
And it was, it wasn't, it was probably a condition that we just didn't know about, and she died in her sleep or something along those lines.
And you're how old at this point?
I would have been about in my mid-20s.
Okay. Yeah. That's a lot to take.
Yeah, no, it's so, and the reason I'm bringing all this up is to say, like, so what happened was, well, first, actually, it's this whole like natural like male tendency. I'm fine. I'll deal with it. I'll suck it up and do it. And these are, at least my grandfather, he's a fairly stoic guy, so that was kind of a unique thing to hear from him and in that generation. But I think they just looked at me and were like, what are I was like maybe 25.
Right.
I had to do the math again, but I was in my mid-20s. Like, that's not something you're equipped emotionally to handle. And so what happened was that, so eventually I'm like, all right, well, I guess I gotta go to therapy. And I sat down with a therapist, and I really kind of broke down what had happened. And I genuinely walked into therapy with the intention of, I'm a broken toy, I need fixing.
Right.
Simple as that. You're going to tell me this hurt. I'm going to say, yes, it does. We're going to find some remedy to that and move on with our lives. Mm-hmm. It felt so transactional.
Yeah, let's do this.
Have you been to therapy yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I have.
That experience?
I've had good and bad. I mean, when I first started off, when I was a teenager and I did go through therapy, I was a teen mom, and so I did have some issues and had to go to therapy for stuff like that. And it was a horrible experience. So I put it away for a long time and tried to find other people, and it wound up being a bit better. And it's like being in a good relationship. You have to find somebody who fits and gets you and you feel safe with, right? So I finally have that person. She's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my first therapy, it wasn't anything about her. It's just it was literally my interpretation of therapy. I was like, oh, cool. Like, I go in, I say what's on my mind, you tell me what's wrong about that, and then we fix it. Like, it truly felt
like fix me.
Like like if you go to the doctor and say my throat hurts, they're going to do a strep test and this and that, and then antibiotics, and here you go, or whatever they do for whatever your ailment is.
Perfect example, though, of why we talk about it, because I think a lot of people think that's what therapy is.
Yeah, and I could not be more wrong. Mm-hmm. And so some are, if anyone's listening to this and they hear this, and they're like, that was pretty long-winded to get there. But the point of why I said all the things that I said prior to this was all of your experiences in life, every single thing you go through impacts how you approach things. You're not just going, it's obvious, yes, if someone you know and love and care about dies, like, that's grief. Yeah. Like, we can just blanket statement that. But what your grief does and how it impacts you is completely unique to each experience, based on the experiences you have with that person, based on how you grew up in your life, based on all the things that have happened coming before that. And I found, for me, like, one of the hardest parts for me to get over was because it goes back to that exceptional. Mm-hmm. While I would never hold anybody else to that standard, for myself, it's, you should have known better. You should have known something was wrong. You should have caught this sooner. You should have, never mind the fact that I don't possess any sort of medical training whatsoever. Never mind the fact that like she was genuinely fine the last time we talked that night.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that I can now objectively look back and see that in that moment as I'm grieving. I genuinely believe this is my fault.
Mm-hmm. Right. Of course. Yeah.
And so I you know.
And I only say, of course, because of your age, the circumstances. You're like, well, yeah. Wow, what a place to be put in.
I mean, and beyond that, I mean, the night of everything, I had like, obviously that's a traumatic moment by itself, and then I have to go talk to the police,
right?
Because the boyfriend did it. That's it literally went from like I said, I called her office. It was her office that came there first. They go in, they see her, they call 911.
Mm-hmm.
Ambulance comes, police come, but I called my parents because I had told them I was on my way, and I was like, hey, like, this is that's going on. I'm not really sure what I'm going to find, but I'm just telling you what's going on. And then I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, I think the worst. And she said, your dad's on his way.
Right.
And so he, hauled it across town and met me there. But, the police kind of pulled me aside, and they're like, hey, obviously, like, you don't, we need to talk to you.
Yeah.
And so, we basically left straight from her apartment. We went straight to the police station, and I go in a room. It's just me and a couple officers, and they want to go through everything. They want to go through our sex life. They want to go through, was she on any drugs? And again, like, this is not to dismay anything. Like, of course, like, anyone hearing that can naturally go, oh, well, you're grieving. That's awful. Like, why would they do that? But at the same time, you got to understand, like, she was also in her mid-20s. Like, that doesn't happen super often.
Yeah, it's a strange,
It's a strange circumstance. And so they're just doing their job. And in the moment, I'm confident I screamed. I'm confident I yelled. I'm confident I laughed. Because when they're asking questions, like I said, about your sex life and your dad standing outside the other door, like, a part of that can't get out of your head.
Right. Yeah.
But I have to talk about it nonetheless. And, eventually I leave, and, and it was obviously, like, it wasn't anything I could have done, and they know that, and it all worked out. But, you're already dealing with a traumatic thing, and then that happens, and it just added fuel to the fire. And I remember calling friends on my way home, and just trying to, like, wrap my brain around it, mostly because I think at the time I had to take my car home, and I was like, I don't want to just sit here in silence.
No.
So I just called friends and told them, and I got home. I think I slept 30 minutes that night.
Yeah, like well, and when you actually look back on it, do you think, how much of it do you actually remember? Were you, how it's like so surreal in a moment like that. It's like you're floating above yourself in a way. It's just such chaos.
Well, I've often wondered. I mean, I'm a firm believer that we're all a matter of vantage points. My interpretation of events and your interpretation of events are all unique in their own ways. And so I've often wondered if how I recall things is exactly as it went, and maybe there's, things in that. But, like, generally speaking, that's the order of operations. But yeah, I mean, I have often thought, like, I would love to see, like, the interrogation conversation, like, video replay.
Right.
I know how it went in my head, but I'd be curious to see it from the other side.
But you know what? Some things are better left to, looking back to, if you had that footage, who knows what place that could put a person into as well, like, to have to see all that again.
You're absolutely right. That's why I've never tried. I don't even think you could, but even if I could, I have no interest in that. No, but it kind of set me on this path of realizing that, going to therapy and working on something, it just got me to realize, like, there are a lot of stuff about me that I hadn't dealt with, and this is just the latest catalyst of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is the latest ramification. Is my ability to handle grief is directly related to issues about my own self that I had not dealt with. And so as I went to therapy and worked on things, eventually you heal, you grow, you learn. And that's when I started, eventually I was kind of at a different crossroads, like more career-wise thing of like trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to start blogging just for my own interest. I've found in therapy, I found writing to be very beneficial for me.
Okay.
I was a writer as a kid. I love writing as a whole. And I was like, what if this is a way for, and so it started with just, I wrote it for myself and I would maybe share it in therapy if I was comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then eventually, you kind of let the smoke clear and time passes. And just like you and I were talking about before we hit record, for me, I realized there are a lot of people suffering that feel like they're completely alone. When I was in my worst places in life, that time when I was, ready to die.
Yeah.
I felt so incredibly alone. No matter how many people reach out or how much people show their efforts and care.
All right, so we've gotten to that time of the show. I hope you guys are enjoying so far. But I would love to give a shout out to a local company. It's a woman out of Sherwood Park, so local to where I am. Her name is Sharifa Usman. She owns Crinkle Mingle Cookies. She's the mom of 2, and she's started this company, and it sounds like it's just filled with love, and her cookies look amazing and are delicious. So if you could give her a follow on Instagram, you can find her at crinkle.mingle. And yeah, check out her links on that page. She's at www.crinklemingle.ca. And yeah, you can order cookies through that link and find out more about her story, which is a pretty cool one. It's very inspirational. And yeah, please enjoy. Please give her some support and give her some shout outs.
I think people don't realize how interconnected all the experiences of your life is. And so like what I felt was in me was in this moment, I'm going to share all the things that have crossed my mind. Because if I put it out there for the world, yeah, guess what? Someone's going to look at that one day and maybe judge me a little bit. But for every person that could judge something that I've said or done, there's also somebody who really needed to hear that, that needed to know they weren't alone in feeling that way, that needed to believe that someone might understand. And maybe that was all they needed to get them through that one moment. So like I said, I started taking my writing and putting it online. I blogged for a period of time. And then from there, I eventually wrote a book. And now I do a lot of stuff on social media with, short form videos and things, just talking about things that I've learned with myself, and in hopes that it brings something to make them feel a little bit better and make them feel less alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ultimately does. It's a ripple effect that, even just, we were talking about how supportive the podcasting world is and mental health. Like you go down that rabbit hole on Instagram or wherever you go, and just how supportive people are. That speaks volumes, just because, you talk to somebody and it just proves, okay, hey, I can trust this person. I can open up. I can tell you my story. And I'm not, like you said, no judgment.
Exactly. So if you don't mind asking, why podcasting for you?
Podcasting for me, because that's an interesting question, because for years, I've dealt with, my own abuse and stuff like that, and then my own mental health stuff. And I always feel like I'm, honestly, I don't have a loud voice about things. And oftentimes when, say I'm in a conversation, I'm a really great listener. I love listening. I love hearing people's stories. I'm an empath, so I just want to hear it all. And I just thought, well, this is the perfect time for me to get out. And so for people to know that, like, this girl from Sherwood Park, Alberta, who has 3 kids and I'm 2 years sober, it's time to share about what it is that I can give back, and use my voice. Because when I get stressed or I get really, like, I know I'm not doing well, I actually get this like lump in my throat. And I think that's because I haven't used my voice. So now it's time. It's just going to happen, and people have to listen to me whether they want to or not. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's not true. Only if they want to. But yeah, that's kind of why the podcast. And I'm a bit of an introvert, so podcasting to me is more, one-on-one. I get to talk to you, get to know other people, and get that relationship kind of happening, whether it's online or in person. So, yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's been really cool just talking to different podcasts, and there's so many now that exist, and so many different styles and so many different takes, and so I've found it to be a great place for people to have open dialogue, and who knows if everyone's listening or no one's listening, it's still I something that I hope you take for yourself is I can see a lot of people. I don't care if it's podcasts or it's social media or it's book sales or whatever it is that you do in this world. It's easy to get hung up on the stats because you see that and you're like, how many people listened, or how many people viewed, or how many people liked, or how many sold copies or whatever. And I found if you're left wanting that, I learned that like early on. I do stand-up comedy from time to time.
Right. Yeah. I want to talk about that. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
We can talk about that, whatever. But, it was funny. We had in like the local Tampa Bay community, there was a young kid who kind of just reached out. I was like, hey, just, any advice anyone has? And I said, if you're doing it for the laughs, you're in it for the wrong reason.
Right.
Like you have to do this because you believe it. Because I promise you, for the first so many shows, you're gonna bomb. It's gonna be bad, and it's because that's the only way you're gonna get better. And so if you're doing it because you need validation, like that's where it's a recipe for disaster. You have to do this because deep down in your soul, there's something that says it needs to get out.
Yeah.
And you need that form of expression. Do it for you. Don't do it for anybody else.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because it does play in, like I started this, if I can help just one person at a time, like I guess. And I have like last week, I was kind of feeling a little bit discouraged about it. And then I had 3 people reach out to me and tell me what a difference, how much they admire what I'm doing and that they listen. And one girl's like, I'm your biggest fan. And I was like, that's not why I do it, but it is kind of nice. It's kind of nice to hear somebody's hearing it. But yeah, you don't want to get wrapped up in that because that's it, creating your own another mental health thing.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
You end up creating this unrealistic. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's an unrealistic expectation that you can never maintain. And so I want that for anybody. And also, by the way, if you are in any of those fields that I was talking about, whether it's writing or social media or anything else, with every good, there will come a bad one day.
Yes.
Someone is going to try to bring you down a notch because they're hurting and they need to offset that hurt somehow. And they're going to take it out on you.
Have you had much experience with the trolls and stuff? Like, because you do a lot of your 60-second videos, which I love, by the way.
It's interesting. I've gotten a few here and there, and and bad reviews and things like that. And the way I've always looked at it is, one, I'm going to try to kill you with kindness always. But I look at it as simply as this: if you care enough to make negative anything on the internet, I don't care if it's a negative comment on social media or a negative post or review or whatever, if you care enough to do that, then that means you are probably very hurt on your own.
Exactly.
And if I need to be your punching bag, take it.
Right.
I hope that gave you whatever you needed that day, because I don't. I'm not going to take it personally.
Right.
But I, for damn sure, I'm not going to let you disrupt what I'm doing. You're not going to, the one negative is never going to outweigh the one person I can help, ever.
Exactly. Yep.
And so, if anything, that's where I value those. Like, again, you're not doing it for the accolades, you're not doing it for the validation, but when you get that positive, that person saying, hey, that really hit home. Or like, I've had people from my hometown reach out to me and say, hey, that really meant a lot to me. That did something, and it opened, it's like someone I haven't even talked to for a decade.
Yeah.
And you get that feeling, you're like, okay, you make it worth dealing with any of this nonsense.
Exactly.
Yeah, occasionally you will.
Yeah, and that's just life. You get that just driving down the road and somebody gives you the finger because you're not going fast enough. It doesn't. So you gotta, right? Just
clearly something was bothering them that day, and
that's
they chose
right.
to take it out on you.
exactly.
It had nothing to do with you, everything to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the way you put that. I really like that perspective for people to hear, you know, because oftentimes you do take it way too seriously, and I do, because I'm a fairly sensitive soul. But I'm learning to same thing. Like I said, everybody's pretty positive in this realm of mental health that I've noticed so far. There's some haters, but I haven't really experienced that at all myself. So.
And by the way, I'm not immune to it.
Yeah.
It still hurts. Like the first time you see something like that, you're like, damn.
Yeah.
That hurt.
Yeah.
That stung. That hit a place. That hit a nerve. Especially like depending on the comment, depending on the type of thing, whatever your insecurities may be. Like it's natural. Like I have no delusions that I or anyone's gonna just get rid of that. I wouldn't want you to.
Right.
To get rid of that human part that says that hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But once you let the hurt and the sting go, feel whatever that is, take a breath, and then think about it realistically.
Yes.
Think about what that person has to go through in their life to get to think that like that's going to prove something. Like, oh, I'm going to leave this awesome comment on your post and really just hammer it home. Like, really? Like that was your best shot? That was your best moment?
Yeah.
Like, who are we kidding here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I keep saying, yeah. So
it's
I
true,
wanted to,
it's right.
I wanted to ask you, okay, so you talked about your book and it's called One Step Forward, Ideally in the Right Direction, which I love that.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah, it kind of hits home for me in some ways, because I always say, I wished I hadn't gone left. Why did I go left? But now I know why. But anyways, but in the right direction. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and it came kind of from your blog, from when you had started blogging, or was it totally different? Separate?
I wouldn't say it's separate. I would say it's in many ways like a culmination of all. I spent 5 years blogging before I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 5 years, think about how much time you spend doing something like that, like how you grow and develop. There are things that I wrote 5 years ago that I don't feel that way anymore. And that's okay. And I don't take those down. That was part of my journey. It felt real in the moment. Now I'm here and I feel a little differently about it.
It also gives you the perspective. Sorry to interrupt. It also gives you the perspective looking back. Like, I'm an artist as well, and I started my own Instagram page for that. And I look back at some of the stuff that I first did, and I'm like, oh my! And I've been tempted to take it down, but it's you. Look at where you've come from, right? And it takes time. So, anyways, go on.
No, that's the best way to put it. It is you in a time capsule. And, I would never want to take anything away from that person. But really what it came down to was, I'd been writing for a while. And I think even as a child, like before any of this stuff that we're talking about today had come to light, I loved writing. If you asked 12-year-old Will Craig, what's he going to do? First, it was going to be going to the NBA, because I was 5'8" when I was 12 years old. I'm only 5'11" now. So, those NBA dreams got shot really fast. But outside of that, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write a novel. It was one of those like full circle moments. Talk about positive comments and such. My 6th grade teacher commented when I made it public that I wrote a book and all those things. And she commented, she said, I remember when you were in my class and you said you were going to write a book.
Yeah. And
that was just really like a full circle moment for me. But I had always thought about it, but as silly as it sounds, and even as someone's listening to this right now might go, he's pretty wordy, he talks a lot, like, this is going to sound silly, but I didn't think I had enough words to string together to write a full novel.
Yeah.
And there's a friend of mine who is a writer full time, and he told me, he kind of reached out, he said, Will, if you took 2 years of your blog and just literally copied and pasted it, that's enough for a book. Like, you have the words, you're just telling yourself it has to be done in a certain amount of time.
Right.
Just do it. And so he challenged me, in 90 days, give me a rough draft. And I did.
90 days,
and,
yeah.
I mean, it was mostly just because he knows me too well to know that, like, you have to give me a hard deadline. If you don't, I won't do it.
Yeah. True story.
And so, yeah.
No pun intended.
Exactly. 100%. So he gave me the deadline, and Then I did the rough draft and worked things out and kept working. And another friend of mine gave me a good piece of advice that I would give to anybody, whether it's writing a book or doing social media or something along those lines, or a song, even like music. Done is better than perfect.
Yes.
In any form of art, and this is actually good for you as well too for podcasts.
Yes.
In any form of art, there's always something more you can tweak. There's always something more that you can turn a little bit, or you can try this or do that. But at a certain point, you have to just put it out there. You have to just accept that it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
You can always go back and, re-record it, or you can do something better, or you can learn the next time. But at a certain point, you have to say, I'm done with this. I'm putting it out there for the world.
Yes.
Let the chips fall where they may. That's a really hard thing to do. It's way easier said than done.
Tell me, it is.
but it hit me when he said that, and I remember walking out of this office where I'm in, and I walked over to my wife and I said, "It's done."
Wow, that's awesome.
I think I cried. I cried a lot in that process. I remember I'll never forget when I got 5 copies from Amazon to as my author copies before it was released, and I got to hold it in my hand, and I called my mom. I'm crying, and I'm just I did it.
Yeah.
I did it. The thing that I always wondered if I could do, I did.
Yeah. I just got chills from that. I like that. There it is. Okay. Hold it up real quick. I couldn't. Yeah, I've seen the cover. I looked it up. Yeah, that's such a cool cover too. Where did you come up with that?
I didn't. I hired someone to do that.
Okay. Yeah, because that's...
I have to be honest, fully transparent. I found someone through Fiverr. He's a graphic designer. If anyone wants to DM Carrie for that information, I can give you his name.
Who is it through?
He makes it public. There's an app called Fiverr.
Okay.
Fiverr. And it's just a way you can basically hire people for outsourcing for tasks and such. And so I actually used that application for both hiring. I hired someone for graphic design. And he was great. He gave me multiple different versions of it. And then I got to pick, and then I was like, well, what about this color here and that? And great amount of editing there. Then the same thing for actually editing the book.
Okay.
I hired someone, said, hey, this is my manuscript. We can, most of the time they charge you for a number of words, and then depending on how many revisions you get, so you can look around for that. Same thing. I found somebody that does book editing. And then
which is important, right? You can put your own books out there, but if it's not, I think that's a pretty important step, is to have the editing and that professionalism with it.
Yeah, exactly. And then she also helped me with formatting it the correct way so that it can be printed. So, because my book, for those who don't know, is available on Amazon and Kindle, and I actually publish through them. Okay. So that's the way it works. So what I did was I upload my manuscript to Kindle Direct Publishing, and then it's basically print on demand. So if Carrie comes on and orders a copy of my book, it gets printed in that moment of purchase, and then gets sent out, and then they take their cut, I take my cut.
Okay.
That's the end of it.
And can you tell us a bit more about what is in the book?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, the things that I talked about in this podcast in the beginning, that's kind of the introduction. That is exactly, I kind of set the stage for all that I kind of learned about myself and those things. And through those series of events, battling with suicidal thoughts, dealing with grief, dealing with image issues, and understanding who I am as a person, I was able to then not only learn about how to cope with those parts, but other things that I thought I knew about life. Things like my issues with anxiety and my need to control everything around me, and understanding that I can only control the controllables in life. Talking about things like loving the process more than loving the outcome. That's a huge part of where I'm at in this stage of my life is, I love the process of building whatever this could be, whether I end up on a stage doing a TED Talk one day, or if it's just having conversations with you, Carrie.
I see it. I see it in your future.
But if it never happens,
I know.
Happens,
it's okay.
This is the beautiful part of life.
Yeah.
And I love the process of building all of this and doing all these things more than I'll ever love whatever outcome may be achieved.
Yes. And that's
And then
healthy because you're living in right now. You're not living in what could be someday. And that's where those
oh, I
expectations.
disagree with that a little bit. I definitely have my head in the clouds at times
But
and
you
think
have to
about things.
sometimes. I mean,
Sure,
right?
of course.
That's part
Well,
of the fun
and
of
I'm a
it.
yeah, I'm a goal-oriented person. I have goals and ambitions and stuff, but I think what's changed with me over time is that I'm not as beholden to those.
Yeah.
If I don't hit the mark exactly the way I thought I was going to, like I don't break down in tears and where I just get, you know what? I learned something new today. That this didn't quite go the way I thought, or wow, that went better than I ever thought it would.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And you are okay. So I want to talk about your stand up because you, yeah.
Nice.
How did you get into that?
Oh goodness, I've had different phases with that. Is the actual answer. So when I was like, even before I was 21, which is funny because there was a comedy club. It's fine to say because they don't exist anymore. There's a comedy club that I would go to, and I wasn't even 21 yet, but they would let me on stage. They just like I couldn't hang out there for very long, and because it was a bar. I mean, that's what it was. But I was in college. I just thought, you know what? Why not? Like I love the idea of it. That'd be really cool. And I think at the time I had ambition for having a Netflix special one day. And I don't even know if Netflix was really doing comedy back then, but something like that.
Yeah.
And then life happened, and when you're in kind of dark places, you don't feel particularly funny. So I kind of got out of it, got away from it, and then in kind of that self-exploration, I dabbled back into it a little bit when I moved back home with my parents, and I did it a couple times. It was great. I remember like the night I did it, the next day, my mom had left me a note and was like, "I'm so proud of you. It takes guts to get up there and do what you did."
It does.
And so now
it does. That's vulnerable. They say that's one of the most vulnerable places to put yourself.
Oh yeah, it's just you and a mic.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you and a mic, and that's a really terrifying place for a lot of people. And so, but what's fascinating about me and stand-up comedy now is I stopped going to therapy a few years ago, and then I started back up about a year and a half, 2 years ago, because I was in a really rough place when my wife and I moved to Florida.
Okay.
And it wasn't the moving that was the problem. It was actually the opposite. I am a person, something I learned in therapy. I'm a person who craves chaos.
Okay.
I need chaos in my life. That is when I'm at my best. That is when my brain is most high functioning. And if I don't have it naturally, I will create it for myself one way or another.
Right. You'll make sure it happens.
Exactly. Self-sabotage, all those wonderful things. And so I found myself with my wife, and I love her to death. I'm in a job, my day job that I love, and with a bunch of people that I really care about and support. I actually do some great mental health stuff with them too. I'm doing all these things, and I'm living in Florida where I've wanted to live by the beach and all these things, and everything's right.
Yeah.
And yet, I'm waking up in a cold sweat every night. I think I slept 4 hours in a week because my brain couldn't let go, couldn't let me have the comfort because I need the chaos.
Yeah.
And so that eventually my wife looked at me and said, have you thought about going back to therapy, dealing with this? And back down the rabbit hole I went. I think I wrote a blog post about it.
Right.
back down the rabbit hole, and I sat down, and I'm still seeing that same therapist to this day, and she's wonderful. And something I kind of learned with working with her is she said, I think you need a healthy outlet for your chaos, because if you don't, like, your brain's just trying to make it happen for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just trying to create that for you one way or another, and eventually that won't be enough, and you're going to find ways, and you've proven that in your life that you can blow up your life pretty easily.
Yeah.
So stand-up comedy became my thing because I now have a different approach. Instead of working on the same bit over and over again, trying to perfect it, trying to grow and develop that way, I decide the day of an open mic that I'm going to be at the open mic.
Oh.
And then after I get off work, because they usually start around like 7 or so, get off work around 5, and I go in my room and I take my notebook and I start writing.
Wow.
And I come up with what I'm going to do that night.
And you're still doing it now?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
And now I dabble in crowd work, so I take some of the writing pressure off. But like in the moment, I gotta just, hey, I'm gonna say something, and I'm gonna react to that, and that's the ultimate amount of chaos because I have no idea what's about to happen.
Yeah.
It's great.
Oh, good for you. Wow, that is brave. That's bravery right there. But you're also a speaker, right? You speak. You also speak for. Is that you're kind of looking at trying to get into that, aren't you? With more speaking engagements and.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. There's an interest.
I've been reached out to by. Yeah, I've been reached out to. It's public now, so yeah. There's a company called HH Global that I'm coming to speak at on February 22nd. And yeah, I mean, if there's people who are looking for someone to come talk about, their journey in mental health, and a lot of the topics that I'll cover in a speech will be along the lines of the importance of being vulnerable. I also have a whole different one that I'm working on for the compound interest of life.
Okay.
That's still kind of workshopping that, but something I've found in life is we oftentimes want immediate success, and we discount like the small wins over time, but those small wins over time compound really easily. Like the most simple way I can explain is like we want to drop 20 pounds in a month because we want to see those immediate results. But imagine if you lost a pound a week. A pound a week doesn't sound like a lot. It feels kind of like insignificant to a lot of people. But that's 4 pounds in a month. That's 8 pounds in 2 months. That's 16 pounds in 4 months. I mean, that's just basic math. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But we discount that in 6 months.
I don't know. I'm not very good at math.
But we discount it. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't think about the fact that with that same metric of 1 pound a week, 4 pounds a month, that's 16 pounds in 4 months. That's in 4 months.
Yeah.
Less than half a year, you could have 16 pounds. Like that's incredible. But we discount it because it's not the immediate success that we're demanding that we have.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of a one way of describing it, but that's something that I'm working on is kind of just the compound interest of life. Who knows? Maybe
I think that's actually quite brilliant. Like, it's again, like the ripple effect. That's kind of what I was talking about. I mean, you started off, how many podcasts have you done now? And you...
Oh goodness, I think 5, 6, something like that.
When you first reached out, it was probably just I wonder if they'll even want to hear what I have to say, right? And that's how I felt about this. And now I'm talking to you. I talked to Todd. I talked to there's somebody else I'm excited about having on here right away. And it's just like, I would have never thought that when I was in my living room with my friend Ting, who was just supporting me. And yeah, so anyways.
You never know where it's going to lead.
That's
the thing, and that's the beautiful part of life.
Yeah.
So that's what I want for everybody, is just finding whatever that is that speaks to your soul.
Yeah.
And just going all in. Like I say this, I was talking to some friends from work today about doing this with you tonight. And I said, I can live with failure. I can't live with not trying.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm after. And whatever trying gets me is what it gets me. But I'm going to do everything that I know how to do.
Yeah. And the biggest thing about that is it always comes back to self-love. And if this is something that you love and you have passion for, then you're going to automatically give that feeling to other people, being genuine to other people, that this is who you are and you're standing for what you believe in. You're doing what you love. So yeah, yeah.
I love that. That's exactly kind of the message I always tell. Very specific example. My company that I work at, we have a mental health colleagues resource group, which I'm the chairperson for, and the company's named Conga, and so we have this conference coming up in February, and they want us to be able to promote.
What is the name?
Conga, C-O-N-G-A, Conga, just like the dance.
Okay, yep.
We're a software company. Todd actually came and spoke, which was great, and another podcast host that we know. It was a really cool endeavor. But anyway, so we have these colleague resource groups, and so and most of them just various D&I initiatives and such. And I was like, I want to do one for mental health. Let's do it. And so we're recording videos to kind of promote it at an internal conference we're having.
Yeah.
And I do my part, and then I had one of the members talk about his, and he's like, what about this? What about that? And I'm like, be yourself, be genuine.
Mm-hmm.
That is more important than how perfect it sounds or any of those things. I firmly believe that sincerity is the most underrated value in any form of communication.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, because I think you can spot it right away. If you were to, like, if there's one piece of advice, and this is probably such an overused question, but if there was one piece of advice you could give to somebody else that's like living in their head and, isolating or just not doing so hot today, what would that advice be?
If you're the person trying to support that person, I would say there's no perfect statement. There's nothing you're going to say that's going to make it okay. And I know that's hard to hear, but it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that person needs is to feel heard and seen and understood. And even if you can't fully wrap your head around it, showing sincere interest will go you a long way. If you are the person that is in a dark place, once again, there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to make it all feel okay. I would give anything in this world to tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
I did not come up with this on my own.
Okay.
I saw it somewhere, and it always resonated with me. Never be a prisoner of your past. It was just a lesson, not a life sentence.
Oh, it's true, because we do hold ourselves hostage in those moments, and we hold on to them, and because we feel like we have to stay there.
Uh-huh.
Right?
We create our own prison. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you're in that dark place, you genuinely feel like you should be there.
Yeah.
You don't deserve anyone's empathy or sympathy, and that's like the darkest place of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And
like, did you? Okay, so here's a question for you then. Like, when you went through, and I mean, if you're comfortable answering it or not, or if I'm going back quite a bit here, but when that giving yourself permission to feel better and feel happier, for instance, like after your girlfriend passed on, how did that feel for you? Like moving forward from that and giving yourself permission to move forward, to get better, to, was all of that through the help of therapy that you were able to do that? Or do you think that it just came a point where the grieving kind of changes forms and you allow yourself to again?
I would say therapy definitely helped. I'm never going to say it didn't. I would encourage. There's no person that exists in this world that I don't think could benefit from therapy.
Yeah.
But I think what helps me to, and I like the way you worded that. We don't move on. We move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer in that. I think the thing that helps me move forward the most was that I looked at the pain that I felt as this cross I needed to bear and something along those lines, because it was my only connection at this point. If I lose the pain, then I have nothing left, because that's all I have left. I'm not going to get to see her again. I'm not going to get to feel anything with her again, like in that way. But instead, what happened was my mindset changed on what grief meant, and what I realized was that pain was just a reminder that everything I felt before that was real.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder that those things happen, and the only true path to love is the willingness to accept the pain. Like, that is, they don't have to pass away.
Mm-hmm.
You could be knee deep in a relationship, love someone and they could do something horrible. They could cheat on you. They could do other things. And that pain hurts.
Mm-hmm.
It stings. But all that means is that love was real. That person wasn't worthy of it.
Yeah.
If they cheat on you and they do something like that, that person wasn't worthy of it. But nonetheless, that's just a reminder that it was real. And unfortunately, the only path to love, though, is to allow that level of vulnerability. If you keep everyone at a distance, yes,
mm-hmm.
that's true. You can prevent yourself from maybe getting hurt. But you also prevent yourself from ever feeling that love again. And you are worthy of love. Everyone is worthy of love.
Yeah, yeah. And to be human is to feel pain. And if you believe in all that, like, everything really comes down to love. And yeah, so we can break our own hearts. We can be brokenhearted by others. There's just so many things that life is messy, and it's kind of how you get through it. And, and again, I think to anybody that, like, I know for me, if I was to pass on and for some reason I could look down and see somebody, I wouldn't want them to be hurting. I would want them to
No.
be, you know. Okay, so that was a serious side. I was just mental health. I love. Okay, so the comedy part of it. Do you ever put the mental health into your comedy, into your acts?
Yes, from time to time. So my first time getting on stage when I moved to Florida, I actually made it part of the joke because I was so out of practice. I don't typically like to have like a notepad or anything in front of me, but I was like, man, I'm really out of practice. I'm going to do this. So I had my notepad in front of me, and like one of the jokes like didn't quite land the way I didn't. So in the back of my mind, I was like, all right, writing this down for therapy.
Yeah.
And I said that in the mic, and it got people to laugh. And
yeah.
I thought it was pretty funny. Or I've definitely made jokes. If nothing else, I'm very self-deprecating, and so I think in some ways it's a very positive thing because once you own your flaws, nobody can use them against you, and I think that's okay. Mm-hmm. Now it can veer too far, I think, to where it becomes this defense mechanism that like is preventing you from actually dealing with some of your own insecurities and such. But a healthy dose of self-awareness is good for everybody.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. It's like I say, I laugh at myself all the time, and sometimes that's Absolutely. A good thing. And I know I kind of go to humor as a defense mechanism somewhat. So it makes me feel comfortable if I'm in an awkward, like speaking in front of people has always been scary. But once I get going, it's not so bad, but it's the getting going. That's what gets me.
But what's funny, whether it's comedy or speaking or doing podcasts and putting it out there for the world or whatever the case may be, when you're putting yourself out there, there's a quote, and I have to give credit to both the person who wrote it, but then also the person who I heard it from. It was actually Mark Manson, who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving I don't know if you swear on this, but fuck.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So he wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and he quoted this on a different podcast that he was on from David Foster Wallace, and he said, you will become way less concerned with what other people think of you when you realize how seldom they do.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. We don't realize it in life, how we think all the time, all these things that we do all day long that everyone's like so much thinking about it. But think about it honestly for your own life for 1 second. You were at some restaurant. You saw someone wearing this ridiculous outfit. You thought about it for like a split second. Mm-hmm. Thought that was weird. Maybe even made a comment about it when you went home. And then have you ever thought about it since?
Right. No. Yeah. I actually learned that through a therapist because same thing. She'd say, okay, you're in the mall and you walk past somebody and you notice something different about them. You might notice it and then literally you'll see somebody else 5 seconds later. It's
exactly.
Yeah. So
no, exactly. That's been something that I try to hold true with all of this is that, I know that most people, there is like that element of shame and guilt. And I hate that for people. And because people ask me all the time, silly little example. When I got married with my wife, the naturally, historically, the bride comes down, here comes the bride, all of that. She came down, my wife came down to Can't Help Falling in Love. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. But she decided, well, if I'm coming down and making a spectacle of it, you have to too. I was like, oh, so I get a walkout song. Oh. And she was like, well, yeah. And I was like, oh, honey. So I came out to Jay-Z's public service announcement.
Oh, nice.
And it was, and I came out, it was awesome from the get-go. And in that split second, as I'm coming down the aisle, I just decided to do a quick little spin move and right on the beat and walk right up to the center stage. One of my groomsmen, one of my best friends, pulled me. He's like, I could never do that. I could never just do like, how did you know? I was like, I just decided in that moment. He's like, how do you just do that? And I said, I think you think confidence stems from my ability to have, belief that I'm going to do it right. I just didn't care if I was wrong. If I fell down, okay.
Yep. Yeah, whatever.
Then we do that. Yeah. Then guess what? Then I pick myself up, brush my shoulder off, and move on with my life.
That's
and then
right.
We just turn it into something else. So it's the confidence doesn't actually come from this like blind faith in yourself. It usually comes from the fact that I can live with whatever the results are.
Yeah. Well, and either way, that would have turned out, as long as you didn't get hurt, you would have made people laugh. So
exactly,
right?
Like, it just, either way, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a question for you.
Take that.
I have a question for you. I ask everybody this question: is what is what is the last best thing that you do every day before you go to bed? Every night before you go to bed.
Last best thing I do before going to bed. I say to my wife every single night, "I love you, sweet dreams, and good night."
Oh.
Every single night.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a pretty amazing relationship. Just the way you talk, you can tell that you're, pretty happy guy.
She is the best part of me. And I don't mean that in like I hold her on some pedestal of any sorts, but just her ability to... I am an overly anxious person, and I naturally, like I said, crave chaos and all these things. Mm-hmm. And when I am with her, I just don't care about any of the outside noise.
Right.
Because I know that no matter what goes wrong or how the world unfolds, I look at her and I'm like, we're going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. One way or another. The world comes crashing down, then guess what? I guess we're going to have to figure our way out of this, and we will.
Yeah.
Together. And so she is my peace. She is my safe place. She is the thing that I am most proud of in this world. And I will say this until I die, because I don't care what I accomplish. Like I said, I could do that TED Talk one day, and I could do all these other great things. The number one thing I am most proud of in this life is our relationship.
That's amazing. It is. Because that's what it comes down to, is family relationships. And, it's all those little things we think are little things, but they're not. That's, your true people. And like you said, the people you can put your trust in to be yourself.
She enabled me, because I didn't have to pretend with her. This is probably silly. This is silly, actually, but it's the truth. First night we met, I won't go into all the details of everything before, but we met, and I told her everything. Mm-hmm. I told her about Allison. I told her about the brain surgeries, and I don't do that historically. I'm usually more like, we'll figure this out and see how we go. Nope, she got all of it from the get-go, because I don't know why. I cannot explain it. But in that moment, I was like, I don't want to hide in front of you anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she has never, from that moment, ever made me feel like I had to hide something from her.
She sounds like a wonderful woman. You're a lucky man.
Yeah. I'm waiting every single day for her to realize she can do better than me. So until she hasn't figured it out, we're good.
No, it sounds like you guys are, it's good. I like to hear all that. I like to hear the good feels, and that you have the support, and it's important, especially with what you're doing. And, with the book and everything, like, to have somebody in your corner that's like rooting you on is it's huge, really. It's a big thing. As much as you need to love yourself, it's still nice to have somebody there that's like, yeah, you know what, I think what you're doing is pretty amazing.
She is. She's so supportive, and I always send her the videos ahead of time, just because I'm curious. What are your thoughts? Like, you're the only person I actually care. The rest of it, we'll just, if people like it, they do. If they don't, they don't. But
that's right.
I sent it to her ahead of time, and she was she read the book before anybody else did, and and in the book, I mean, I talk about some dark stuff. I talk about things that I'm not proud of. Mm-hmm. And I knew going in, though, because it definitely, when you talk about these types of things, I talk about drug use, I talk about thoughts of suicide, all those things. It's really heavy shit.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder, like, what are people going to think? That's natural. I don't care what I say about lack of shame and stuff. Every part of you is going to wonder how are people going to see it. Mm-hmm. The difference is not caring at the end of the day when it's all said and done, but you are naturally going to be curious. And with my wife, I found comfort in knowing if everyone in the world decides that I'm no longer worth loving, there's at least one person who does. Now, that's not going to happen, and I know that. I've dealt with that in therapy. But knowing that even if it did, I've got someone that is going to love me for who I am.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. I keep saying cool. That shows me age. It's pretty cool, man.
It is cool. It is.
Yeah.
It's yeah. And especially like, in when you're talking about like, the harder part with like the Allison part of the equation is like, I'm sure people have wondered, how does that work? You have someone you dated, because that's the thing. When you break up with somebody, it's messy a lot of times and it's not fun and everything, but you still get to have that closure to some degree. Maybe not always as perfect, but there is a end to this and you both go on to exist in your lives. But when you're with somebody and they pass, they die, you don't get that knockout, drag out fight. You don't get that long argument. You don't get any of those things. It just one day they're there and the next they're not. And then there's a natural discomfort in moving on. There's a natural discomfort of what do I do? And I definitely spiraled a bit there. I will fully acknowledge that. But through all of that, I found somebody that I didn't have to hide it from. And she's so amazing with it's never felt like a competition. She's not trying to compete. She's not trying to be anything. She's not trying to replace anything. She, went with me to her gravesite. She, when, it's the anniversary of her passing, like I always have to think about certain things, and she has done nothing but be supportive. You want to get out of town? Let's get out of town. You want to write for 6 hours? I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever it is that you need to get through
space,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just that she acknowledges that certain times of the year, I know for me, like it doesn't even really hit you always at first, but it's like, oh shit, that's why I'm acting the way I am, because something like that comes up and it sometimes slowly creeps up. So if she's very aware of those things for you, that's a gift in itself.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I'm incredibly lucky, and she'll get to hear all this and get really insecure. So, Alexis, I love you.
Aw. Right on. Alexis, I love you too.
She's great. If there was one thing that someone has said about my book that like really hit on, and I've heard this feedback a number of times, is it sounds like I'm talking to you. This book was not written with the intent of it being a literary masterpiece. This was never with the intent of I'm going to find the flashiest words. If you're listening to me right now and have gone through this entire podcast, you will hear this voice in those pages. And that's how I wrote it, and that's how I intended it to be. So if anyone's wondering, like, oh, is it going to be some textbook break? No.
Yeah.
Not at all. That's not who I am. I swear an awful lot in it. I have a lot of fun with it. I poke fun at myself. But at the end of the day, the hope is that it's relatable that way. And if it's relatable, then people are more likely to feel something and maybe do something about it in their life.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. And that's, because that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned it, because a lot of people will stay away from if they think it's a self-help book. Do you have, read us something from.
So it's funny you said it like that.
Okay.
So the very first page, nothing else before it. I want to make something abundantly clear before we go any further. I'm not an expert here. Far from it, actually. I'm not here to present you with a decade of research. I have no intention of persuading you to share my viewpoint. There's zero part of me that believes I have all the answers. I'm someone who has taken some tough looks in the mirror, battled some demons, recovered from tragedy, and emerged from all of these actually pretty fucking okay with my existence. I am passionate about what going to therapy and exploring my psyche has done for me as a human being. I am merely an enthusiast of the human experience who has the desire to bring a healthy dose of reality into what we call self-help.
So I can't thank you enough for taking the time again to be here and to talk about this. It's so important. And is there anywhere, like, where can people find you? I know you have your link tree on your Instagram and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. On Instagram, it's at mental_health_with_will. And it is verified now because I had some issues with someone trying to hack me once, so it's verified. So if it doesn't have the blue check mark, it's not me.
Okay.
And I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok. I have a YouTube channel as well. I think this year in 2024, I'm going to play around with some long format stuff. The book, One Step Forward, Ideally in the Right Direction, is available on Amazon. Also, if you are a Kindle Unlimited member, then you can actually have a copy of it from there. You pay by page or however that works with your subscription.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's available there as well.
Thank you so much again for tuning in to the Carry On with Carrie podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It was great talking to Will. He's a really good guy, and he has such good experiences to share with everyone. If you want to give him a follow, please make sure you check him out on all of his social media and feeds and all that good stuff, and check out his book. Again, to Crinkle Mingle, the cookies are amazing, and give her a follow as well on Instagram. Thank you again for listening, and if you would like to give me a follow and share some support, you can find me on Instagram at carryonwithcarrie_podcast and on Facebook at carryonwithcarrie podcast. The show is available on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. I started a YouTube channel as well now, so if you want to check it out, it's available in all the spots. So hopefully if you got something out of this, make sure to share, and maybe we can help just one more person at a time.